Blood doesn't lie. Alphas rule. Omegas serve. That's what the kingdom taught Christina Norton from the moment she could understand words. But when you're born with a power that defies every law of nature, you learn that bloodlines mean nothing compared to what beats inside your chest. The royal palace of Silvercrest stood as a monument to hierarchy. Its marble halls separated the worthy from the worthless, the powerful from the powerless. And somewhere in its shadowed corridors, a 6-year-old girl with silver eyes was about to shatter everything they believed about destiny. Chapter 1. The Maid's Daughter. The servants' quarters smelled of lye soap and desperation. Christina Norton pressed her small body against the cold stone wall, watching her mother, Elva Garcia, scrub the floor of the palace kitchen on hands and knees. The woman's fingers were raw and bleeding, her omega scent dampened by exhaustion and the wolfsbane tea she drank every morning to make herself tolerable to the alpha nobles. "Mama," Christina whispered. "Your hands." "Hush, little star." Elva's voice cracked with fatigue. "Omegas don't complain, we survive." Christina was 6 years old, but she'd already learned what survival meant in Silvercrest. It meant her mother worked 18-hour days for scraps. It meant the other servants whispered that Elva's daughter had no scent, a defect that marked Christina as even lower than an omega. It meant the head housekeeper, Ernestine Hopkins, took pleasure in assigning Elva the most degrading tasks. "Your mother's lucky we keep her," Ernestine had sneered just that morning, her alpha pheromones thick with contempt. "A single omega with a defective pup? She should be grateful we don't throw both of you to the rogues." Christina hadn't understood all the words, but she'd understood the hatred. Now, watching her mother's shoulders shake with silent sobs, something twisted in Christina's chest, something hot and fierce that made her small hands curl into fists. "I'll help you, Mama," she said, kneeling beside Elva. "No," her mother's hand shot out, gripping Christina's wrist. "You stay away from the nobles. You stay invisible. Promise me." "But," "Promise me, Christina." Elva's green eyes were wild with fear. "The Alpha King's son, Prince Charles Hurley. He's dangerous. All the alphas are. If they notice you, if they realize you're different." "I'm not different," Christina lied. "I'm just me." But that was the problem, wasn't it? Christina didn't have an omega's sweet, submissive scent. She didn't have an alpha's commanding presence. According to every test the pack doctors had run, she had nothing, no designation, no future, no place in the hierarchy that governed their world. She was a ghost in a kingdom that only valued power. The incident happened 3 days later. In the Alpha King's private chambers, Elva had been summoned to change the silk sheets, a task usually reserved for the beta servants, but Ernestine enjoyed humiliating her. Christina, as always, had followed at a distance, hiding in the servants' passages that threaded through the palace walls like veins through a body. She wasn't supposed to be there. Children were forbidden in the royal wing. But Christina had learned to move like smoke, and the passages gave her a view of the world that others missed, including the moment when Alpha King Sergio Kaufman collapsed. Through the tiny gap in the wall panel, Christina watched her mother freeze in horror as the most powerful alpha in the kingdom clutched his chest and fell to his knees. The man's face turned gray, his breath coming in shallow gasps. "Help," he wheezed. "Someone." But the room was empty except for Elva. And omegas weren't allowed to touch alphas. It was law. It was sacred. Elva stood paralyzed, her instincts warring with her training. If she helped him and he survived, she'd be punished for the disrespect. If she didn't help him and he died, she'd be executed for negligence. Either way, she was dead. Christina didn't think. She shoved open the panel and ran. "Christina, no!" Elva screamed. But the little girl was already at the Alpha King's side, her small hands pressing against his chest the way she'd seen the pack healer do once. She didn't know what she was doing, didn't understand the golden light that suddenly poured from her palms, warm and gentle as summer rain. She only knew that the dying man needed help, and no one else would give it. The Alpha King's eyes flew open, his breath returning in a violent gasp. The gray fled from his face. His heartbeat steadied, and when he looked down at the child kneeling beside him, his expression shifted from shock to something Christina couldn't name. What are you?" he whispered. Christina's mother was sobbing now, pulling her daughter away with trembling hands. "Please, Your Majesty, forgive her. She's just a child. She doesn't know. She healed me." The Alpha King sat up slowly, his hand pressed to his chest where the pain had been. This child, an Omega's daughter with no scent, just healed me. Ernestine burst into the room then, her face twisted with rage. Your Majesty, I'm so sorry. This animal and her spawn will be dealt with immediately. No. The Alpha King's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. Leave them. Ernestine's mouth opened and closed like a fish. But, Your Majesty, she touched you. The law. I said leave them. The king's eyes never left Christina's face. All of you. Out. The servants fled. Elva tried to pull Christina toward the door, but the king's next words stopped them both. The child stays. Please, Elva begged, falling to her knees. Please don't hurt her. She's all I have. I'll take any punishment. But don't. I'm not going to hurt her. The Alpha King's expression was unreadable. I'm going to protect her. And that was how Christina Norton, the nobody daughter of an Omega Maid, became the most dangerous secret in the kingdom. Because the Alpha King had recognized what she shouldn't be able to exist as, according to every law of nature and pack hierarchy. Christina wasn't defective. She was a true healer, blessed by the moon goddess herself. And in a world where power was everything, that made her worth more than armies, it also made her a target. The Alpha King's protection came with conditions. She'll stay in the palace, he told Elva that night, after his personal guards had sealed the room against eavesdroppers. But no one can know what she is. No one can know what she did today. I don't understand, Elva whispered, clutching Christina close. Why would you protect us? The king's jaw tightened. Because 20 years ago, there was another true healer in this kingdom. A young woman with your daughter's gift. The noble alphas tore her apart, fighting over who would own her power. By the time I became king, there was nothing left of her, but bones and stories. He looked at Christina, and his eyes held ancient grief. I won't let that happen again. Your daughter will live here, safe and hidden, until she's old enough to protect herself. But if anyone discovers what she is before then, he didn't need to finish. They all understood. Christina would be devoured by the same nobles who smiled and bowed in the king's presence. There's one more thing, the Alpha King said. My son, Charles, he's 10 years old, and his wolf is troubled, violent. The pack doctors say he'll become a rogue before his first shift if we don't find a way to calm the beast inside him. Elva's face went white. You want my daughter too? I want her to be his companion, his friend. Children don't judge each other the way adults do, and Charles needs someone who isn't afraid of him. The king's voice softened. And your daughter needs to learn how to navigate this world before she's old enough to be seen as a threat or a prize. What if he hurts her? Elva's voice broke. Alphas and Omegas. Christina isn't an Omega. She's something the moon goddess hasn't gifted us with in generations. And if there's any hope of my son becoming the king this kingdom needs, instead of the monster it fears. He looked at the little girl with silver eyes who'd saved his life. It rests with her. Christina didn't understand everything the adults were saying. But she understood one thing clearly. Her life had just changed forever. She was no longer invisible. She was a secret wrapped in human skin, living in a palace that would destroy her if it knew the truth. And tomorrow, she would meet the monster prince. Everyone feared the boy whose wolf was so violent. Even his own father looked at him with worry. Prince Charles Hurley, the future Alpha King. The boy who would one day fake sleep just to discover what Christina did in the darkness when she thought no one was watching. Chapter 2. The Monster Prince. Prince Charles Hurley's bedroom was 3 times the size of the servants' quarters where Christina had spent her entire life. She stood in the doorway the next morning, her small hand clutched in her mother's trembling grip, staring at a world she'd only glimpsed through wall panels and keyholes. Silk curtains the color of midnight framed windows that overlooked the kingdom. A bed large enough to sleep 5 people sat on a raised platform, its posts carved with wolves mid-hunt. Weapons lined the walls, swords, daggers, bows all sized for a child but deadly nonetheless. And in the center of it all, sitting cross-legged on an ornate rug, was the boy everyone called a monster. Charles Hurley was 10 years old, but he looked like he'd been carved from stone and fury. His dark hair fell over eyes that gleamed gold, not the warm gold of sunlight, but the cold gold of a predator watching prey. His hands, even at 10, were scarred from training, from fighting, from the wolf that clawed inside him, desperate to break free and paint the world red. He didn't look up when they entered. "Your Highness," Elva whispered, bowing so low her forehead nearly touched the floor. "The Alpha King has sent my daughter to serve as your companion." Charles's eyes flicked to them then, and Christina felt something primal shiver down her spine. His gaze was too old for his face, too knowing. When he looked at her, she had the distinct impression he was deciding whether she'd be more interesting to befriend or destroy. "Leave us," Charles said. His voice was quiet, but it carried the unmistakable command of an alpha. "Your Highness, she's only 6, Elva began. I said leave." The air thickened with power, the kind of dominance that made Omegas fold without thought. Christina watched her mother's body begin to bow automatically, her will crumbling under the weight of alpha pheromones that shouldn't be this strong in a child. Something hot and protective flared in Christina's chest. "Stop it," she said. The room went silent. Charles's head tilted, his golden eyes widening slightly. "What did you say?" "I said stop it." Christina pulled her hand free from her mother's and stepped forward. "You're scaring my mama, and that's mean. No 6-year-old should have been able to resist an alpha's command. No one without a designation should have been able to stand upright under that suffocating dominance." But Christina didn't bow, didn't break. She just stared at the monster prince with her strange silver eyes, and refused to be afraid. For a long moment, Charles didn't move. Then, slowly, the pressure in the room eased. His expression shifted into something Christina couldn't read. Surprise. Maybe, or curiosity. "You're not scared of me," he said. It wasn't a question. "Should I be? Everyone else is. That's because everyone else is stupid." A sound escaped Charles's throat, something between a laugh and a growl. "My father sent you to be my friend. He sent me to keep you from becoming a rogue," Christina corrected, repeating words she'd heard but didn't fully understand. "But I don't know what that means." "It means I'm broken." Charles stood in one fluid motion, moving like the wolf he'd one day become. "It means the beast inside me wants to kill everything, and no one knows how to stop it. So they're throwing a defective Omega's daughter at me like a sacrifice and hoping for the best." He circled her slowly, studying. "Are you my sacrifice, little ghost?" Christina turned to keep him in sight, refusing to show her back. "I'm not a ghost, I'm Christina, and I'm not defective. Everyone says you are. No scent, no designation, worthless. If I'm worthless, why did your father save me?" Charles stopped circling. For the first time, genuine interest flickered across his face. "What do you mean?" Christina opened her mouth to answer, then remembered the Alpha King's warning. "No one can know what you are. Even this boy, especially this boy, couldn't know she was a true healer." "Nothing," she said quickly. I helped him once. That's all. Helped him how? It doesn't matter." Charles moved faster than she could track, suddenly crouching in front of her, his face inches from hers. His eyes had gone completely gold now, his wolf rising to the surface. Up close, she could see the way his hands trembled, not with fear, but with barely restrained violence. "I could hurt you," he whispered. "I could hurt you so easily, and no one would stop me. Do you understand that?" Christina's heart hammered against her ribs. But she'd watched her mother bow and scrape her whole life, watched Omegas fold themselves into nothing to survive, and some stubborn, foolish part of her refused to become that. "Yes," she said quietly. "But you won't." "How do you know?" "Because if you were really a monster, you wouldn't be shaking." Charles's eyes widened. Then, to Christina's shock, he laughed, a real laugh, bright and startled and young. The gold faded from his eyes. The trembling in his hands eased. "You're either very brave or very stupid," he said. "My mama says I'm both. I like your mama." Charles stood and walked to the window, staring out at the kingdom below. When he spoke again, his voice was softer. "Everyone's afraid of me, the servants, the guards, even my tutors. They all think I'm going to snap one day and slaughter the palace. Will you?" "I don't know." He pressed his palm against the glass. "The wolf inside me is so angry all the time, so hungry. Sometimes I can feel it trying to claw its way out through my skin. The pack doctors say it's because I'm too dominant, that my alpha blood is too strong for my human side to control." He looked back at her, and for a moment, he just looked like a scared 10-year-old boy. What if they're right? What if I really am a monster? Christina thought about the golden light that had poured from her hands when she'd healed the Alpha King. The power she didn't understand and couldn't control. The secret that would get her killed if anyone discovered it. I don't think monsters worry about being monsters, she said finally. I think they just are. Charles was quiet for a long moment, then he walked back to her and held out his hand not in command but in offering. My name is Charles Hurley, he said formally. And I'm going to be Alpha King one day, if my wolf doesn't destroy me first. Will you be my friend, Christina Norton? She looked at his outstretched hand. At the boy everyone feared, at the future king who might become a rogue or might become something great, and she took his hand. Okay, she said, but if you try to scare my mama again, I'll punch you. Charles grinned, the first real smile she'd ever seen on his face. Deal. That night, after Elva had tucked Christina into the small bed they'd been given in a room adjacent to the servants' quarters, her mother held her close and whispered warnings. The prince likes you now, but alphas are unpredictable. Especially young ones. You have to be careful, little star. He's not that scary, Mama. He's the most dangerous person in this palace besides his father. Don't forget that. Elva's voice cracked. And don't ever use your gift on him. If he realizes what you can do. I won't, Christina promised. I'll be careful. But careful was relative when you were 6 years old and didn't fully understand why everyone was so afraid. She didn't know that Prince Charles had violent episodes where his wolf took over and he destroyed everything in reach. She didn't know that 3 tutors had already quit in terror. She didn't know that the servants drew lots to see who would have to enter his room, and the losers sometimes came out bleeding. All she knew was that when Charles had smiled at her, he'd looked like someone who'd forgotten how. And that night, as she drifted off to sleep, she didn't hear the conversation happening in the Alpha King's study 3 floors above. You think the girl can help him? Asked Lucas Howe, the king's beta and closest advisor. Alpha King Sergio stared into his wineglass, his expression heavy. I think she's the only chance we have. Charles's wolf is growing stronger every day. If we can't find a way to anchor him, to give him something to fight for besides his own rage. He didn't finish. And if the girl can't help, if Charles hurts her, then we'll have lost 2 people blessed by the moon goddess. The king's jaw tightened. And this kingdom will deserve the monster it creates. But neither of them knew the truth yet. That Christina Norton wasn't just blessed by the moon goddess. She was the moon goddess's apology for abandoning them, a living, breathing miracle wrapped in the body of a child who didn't understand her own worth. And when Prince Charles Hurley finally discovered what she was, when he pretended to sleep just to catch her in the act of saving his life, when he saw the golden light pour from her hands and heal wounds that should have killed him, he would weep, not because she was powerful, but because for the first time in his violent, lonely life, someone had chosen to save him instead of fear him. Chapter 3. The First Blood. 3 months passed before Charles lost control. Christina had fallen into an easy rhythm in the palace, mornings spent in lessons with Charles and his tutors, afternoons exploring the gardens while he trained with weapons, evenings sharing stories before the beta servants came to collect her. The prince had been gentler than anyone expected. Patient even. When Christina struggled to read, he'd slow down. When she asked endless questions about alpha politics, he'd answer without condescension. The servants whispered that it was a miracle, that the monster prince had finally found his humanity. They were wrong. Charles hadn't found his humanity. He'd simply found something worth controlling his wolf for. But control was a fragile thing. It shattered on a cold autumn morning when Ernestine Hopkins made a fatal mistake. Christina was in the palace library, curled up in a window seat with a book about the moon goddess, when she heard her mother scream. The sound cut through the peaceful morning like a blade, sharp, terrified, wrong. Christina dropped the book and ran, her small feet pounding against marble floors as she followed the sound to the main kitchen. What she found there would haunt her nightmares for years. Elva was on the ground, her face already swelling from a vicious blow. Blood trickled from her split lip. Her dress was torn at the shoulder, exposing skin that would bruise purple by evening, and standing over her, holding a wooden rod still raised to strike, was Ernestine Hopkins, her face twisted with cruel satisfaction. Worthless Omega trash, Ernestine snarled. You burned the Alpha King's breakfast. Do you know what happens to servants who disrespect the king? It was an accident, Elva sobbed, trying to curl into a protective ball. Please, I didn't mean. The rod came down again, striking Elva's back with a sickening crack. Christina screamed. Stop, stop. Ernestine's head whipped around, her alpha pheromones flooding the room with dominance. Get this animal spawn out of here before I beat her too. Several beta servants moved to grab Christina, but she bit and clawed, fighting to reach her mother. Let me go. Mama. Christina, run. Elva choked out. Please, baby. Just. The rod struck again, and Elva's words dissolved into a cry of pure pain. Something inside Christina snapped. She didn't remember closing her eyes. Didn't remember the golden light that suddenly exploded from her small body like a shockwave. Didn't remember the way every person in the kitchen stumbled backward as if shoved by invisible hands. She only remembered opening her eyes to find Ernestine on the ground, the rod fallen from her hand, staring at Christina with wide, terrified eyes. What are you? Ernestine whispered. Christina's hands were glowing. Faintly, like embers, but unmistakably there. She'd been seen. The secret was out. Charles found them 10 minutes later. He'd been in weapons training when one of the beta servants had burst in, gasping about the Omega's daughter, an unnatural light, and something's wrong. Charles had sprinted through the palace, his wolf already rising, already furious that someone had dared to threaten what was his. He stopped dead in the kitchen doorway. Christina sat on the floor, cradling her mother's head in her lap, her small hands pressed against Elva's wounds. Golden light poured from her palms, warm and gentle as sunlight, knitting torn skin, healing bruises, taking away pain. The child's face was streaked with tears, her silver eyes blazing with concentration. Don't leave me, Mama, she whispered. Please don't leave me. Around them, a dozen servants stood frozen, their faces masks of shock and fear. Ernestine was backed against the wall, trembling. A true healer. The Omega's defective daughter was a true healer. Charles felt his wolf surge forward, possessive and protective in equal measure. His eyes flooded gold, his hands curled into claws, and when he spoke, his voice carried the absolute authority of an alpha who would one day be king. Everyone out. Now. The servants fled. All except Ernestine, who seemed frozen in place. I said out, Charles roared. And this time his alpha command was so powerful that Ernestine's legs gave out. She crawled toward the door on her hands and knees, whimpering. Charles slammed the door behind her and turned back to Christina. The little girl was still healing her mother, but her hands were shaking now. Her face had gone pale. Whatever power she was using, it was draining her. Christina, he said softly. Christina, stop. You're hurting yourself. I can't, she sobbed. Mama's hurt. I have to fix it. I have to. Your mother is fine. Look. Elva's eyes fluttered open, clear and pain-free. The wounds on her face had vanished. The swelling had gone down. She looked up at her daughter with a mixture of love and terror. Baby, you have to stop, Elva whispered. You have to hide it again, please. But Christina couldn't stop. The power had taken over, pouring out of her in waves, and she didn't know how to turn it off. Her small body began to convulse, her breathing coming in sharp gasps. Charles moved without thinking. He dropped to his knees beside her and wrapped his arms around her small frame, pulling her against his chest. Christina, listen to my voice. You're safe. Your mama's safe. You can let go now. I don't know how, she whimpered. Yes, you do. He pressed his forehead against hers, letting his own power, his alpha dominance, wash over her like a blanket. Not to control her, but to ground her. Breathe with me. In. And. Out. In. And. Out. Slowly, painfully, the golden light began to fade. Christina's hands stopped glowing. Her body went limp in Charles's arms, and for a terrifying moment, he thought she'd stopped breathing. Then her eyes opened, exhausted but alive. Charles? She whispered. I'm here. He smoothed her hair back from her sweaty forehead. I've got you. Everyone saw. Everyone knows. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Your father said I had to hide it, but I couldn't. I couldn't let Mama die. You didn't let anyone die. Charles looked up at Elva, who was sitting up now, clutching her daughter's hand. But she's right. Everyone saw. And by nightfall, every noble in the kingdom will know what you are. Elva's face crumpled. They'll come for her. They'll tear her apart, fighting over who gets to own her power. No, Charles said quietly. They won't. Your Highness. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. Charles stood, lifting Christina easily despite being only 10 himself. I understand that Christina just saved your life. I understand that she's the only true healer the kingdom has seen in 20 years. And I understand that if anyone tries to take her, I'll kill them. His eyes had gone completely gold again, his wolf rising to the surface. But this time, the violence wasn't random or uncontrolled. It was focused, purposeful. She's mine to protect, Charles said. And his voice carried the absolute certainty of an alpha who'd just found his anchor. And anyone who touches her will answer to me. Alpha King Sergio arrived within the hour. He found Charles in his bedroom, with Christina asleep on his bed, and Elva sitting beside her daughter, stroking her hair. The king's face was grave. How many saw? He asked quietly. 14 servants, Charles replied, including Ernestine Hopkins. Ernestine will spread this through the noble houses by sunset. The king ran a hand through his hair. We're out of time. The vultures will start circling. Then let them come. Charles stood between the bed and his father, his posture protective. I'll kill anyone who tries to take her. Charles, I mean it, father. She's mine. The possessiveness in his voice was absolute. She saved my life today. Not literally, but before she came, I was drowning. The wolf was winning, and she pulled me back from the edge just by being there. By not being afraid. By choosing to stay. He looked at the sleeping girl, and his expression softened. I won't let them turn her into a weapon. I won't let them destroy her the way they destroyed the last healer. The Alpha King studied his son, this boy who'd been violence and rage for so long, and saw something he'd almost given up hoping for. Control. Not over the wolf, but with it. A unity of purpose. What do you suggest? The king asked. Make her mine. Officially. Charles's jaw set. Announce to the kingdom that Christina Norton is under my personal protection as the future Alpha King. That any challenge to her is a challenge to me. That anyone who harms her will be considered a traitor to the crown. She's 6 years old, Charles. And I'm 10. We have time. Charles looked his father in the eye. But if we don't claim her now, before the other alphas make their move, we'll lose her. You know I'm right. The king was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Very well. I'll make the announcement at tonight's court. He looked at Elva, who'd gone pale. Your daughter will be given rooms in the royal wing. You'll serve as her personal attendant. No one else will have access to her without Prince Charles's explicit permission. Thank you, Your Majesty, Elva whispered, tears streaming down her face. But Sergio's expression was grim. Don't thank me yet. What I'm about to do will paint a target on all of you. Every ambitious alpha in the kingdom will see this as a declaration of war. Let them, Charles said softly. I'm not afraid. The Alpha King looked at his son, this boy who'd finally found something worth fighting for besides his own rage, and felt both pride and terror in equal measure. Because Charles was right. This was a declaration of war. And wars, especially in a kingdom built on hierarchy and power, always ended in blood. That night, as Christina slept in a bed fit for a princess, guarded by the future Alpha King himself, the noble houses received their summons. By dawn, they would know that the monster prince had claimed the true healer as his own, and by the end of the week, the first assassination attempt would begin. Chapter 4. The Price of Protection. The assassination attempt came on the 7th night. Christina woke to the sound of breaking glass, sharp and violent, shattering the peaceful darkness of her new bedroom in the royal wing. Her silver eyes flew open just in time to see a shadow detach itself from the wall, moving toward her bed with predatory grace. She opened her mouth to scream, but a hand clamped over her face, rough, calloused, smelling of wolfsbane and murder. Quiet, little healer, a male voice hissed. This will be quick if you don't fight. Christina bit down hard on the hand. The man cursed, jerking back, and she rolled off the bed, hitting the floor with a painful thump. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she scrambled backward, her small body trembling. The assassin was massive, easily 6.5 feet tall, his eyes gleaming gold in the darkness. An alpha, sent by one of the noble houses to either capture or kill the true healer before Prince Charles could solidify his claim. "Smart girl," the man said, advancing slowly. "But it won't help. Your prince is 3 rooms away. And I've already dealt with the guards. No one's coming to save you." He lunged. Christina threw her hands up instinctively, and golden light exploded from her palms, not the gentle healing glow, but something wild and desperate. The assassin flew backward, slamming into the wall hard enough to crack the stone. He slumped to the ground, unconscious. Christina stared at her hands, shocked. She hadn't known she could do that, but she didn't have time to process it, because 2 more shadows dropped through the broken window. "The employer said alive if possible," one of them muttered, "but dead works too." "No," Christina whispered, backing toward the door. "No, please." The door exploded inward. Charles stood in the doorway, and he was magnificent. His eyes burned pure gold, his hands had shifted into claws, and his alpha pheromones flooded the room with such overwhelming dominance that both assassins dropped to their knees involuntarily. "You dare," Charles snarled, and his voice was barely human. "You dare enter my home and threaten what's mine." He moved like lightning, faster than any 10-year-old should be able to move. His clawed hand caught the first assassin by the throat, lifting the grown man off the ground like he weighed nothing. The crunch of vertebrae breaking echoed through the room. The second assassin tried to run. Charles caught him before he reached the window, slamming him face first into the floor. The man's nose shattered, blood pooled across the marble. "Who sent you?" Charles demanded, his knee pressed into the assassin's spine. "Go to hell, boy," the man spat. Charles's claws dug deeper into the man's back, drawing blood. "Wrong answer." "Charles, stop." Christina's voice cut through the red haze of his rage. Charles's head whipped around, and when he saw her small and terrified and still glowing faintly with residual power, something in his expression cracked. "They tried to take you," he said, and his voice shook. "They tried to." "I know." Christina walked toward him on trembling legs, carefully stepping over the unconscious assassin she'd knocked out. "But I'm okay. You saved me. I should have been here." Charles looked down at the man beneath him, and his claws retracted slightly. "I should have been here. You're here now." Christina reached out and touched his arm, the only part of him that wasn't covered in blood. "That's what matters." For a long moment, Charles just stared at her. Then his eyes faded from gold back to their normal dark brown, and he looked almost human again. Almost. Behind them, the Alpha King appeared in the doorway with a dozen guards. Sergio took in the scene: 3 assassins, 2 dead or dying, 1 child glowing with power, and his son covered in blood, and his expression hardened. "Take them to the dungeons," he ordered, gesturing to the surviving assassins. "I want to know who sent them and who else is involved." "Father," Charles said quietly, "this is my fault. I claimed her publicly, and now the kingdom knows you're not just a monster." Sergio interrupted. "You're a monster who protects. There's a difference." He looked at Christina, who was still holding Charles's arm. "Are you hurt, child?" "No, Your Majesty. I knocked one of them out. With my power." She looked down at her hands. "I didn't know I could do that." "True healers can both give life and take it away," the king said gravely. "Your power is defensive as much as it is restorative, but using it takes a toll. You'll need rest." "I'm not leaving her alone," Charles said immediately. "I wasn't suggesting you should." Sergio's gaze moved between his son and the little girl. "From now on, Christina sleeps in the room adjacent to yours, with the connecting door open. You'll take turns with the night watch. And I'm assigning Jesse Fuentes and Roberto Kirk as her permanent guards. They're loyal, discreet, and powerful enough to handle most threats." "Most?" Elva's voice came from the hallway, high and panicked. She pushed past the guards and ran to her daughter, dropping to her knees to check for injuries. "Most isn't good enough. Look what they did. They came into the palace to murder my baby." "I know," the king's voice softened. "And I'm sorry, Elva, but this is the world we live in. Christina's power makes her valuable, and valuable things attract predators. Then take her power away." Elva sobbed, clutching Christina close. "There has to be a way. Some ritual, some magic." "Mama, no," Christina whispered. I don't want to lose it. Everyone stared at her. You don't? Elva pulled back, searching her daughter's face. Baby, this power is going to get you killed. Don't you understand that? I understand. Christina looked at Charles, who was watching her with an unreadable expression. But if I didn't have it, I couldn't have saved the king. I couldn't have helped Charles. And tonight I couldn't have protected myself. Her small jaw set with determination. I'm tired of being helpless, Mama. I'm tired of watching you get hurt and not being able to do anything. If I have to be valuable to be safe, then I'll be valuable. She's 7 years old, Elva said desperately, looking at the king. She shouldn't have to think like this. No, Sergio agreed quietly. She shouldn't. But she does. The interrogation of the surviving assassin took 3 days. Charles insisted on being present, despite his father's objections. He stood in the dungeon's shadows, watching as the king's interrogators worked, his eyes never leaving the man who tried to murder Christina. On the 3rd day, the assassin finally broke. Lady Genevieve Fritz, he gasped, blood dripping from his mouth. She hired us, said the true healer belonged with a proper alpha house, not some monster prince who couldn't control his wolf. She wanted the girl captured and brought to the Fritz estate. Charles's hands clenched into fists. Lady Genevieve. The one who keeps trying to arrange a marriage between her daughter and me. She believes if she controls the healer, she controls the future, the assassin continued. The other noble houses are planning similar moves. You've started a war, boy, and you're going to lose. Charles walked forward until he stood directly in front of the assassin. Tell me something, he said softly. Do I look like I'm losing? The man spat blood at Charles's feet. You're a child playing at power. When the real alphas come for the girl, and they will, you won't be able to stop them. Then I'll die trying. Charles's eyes flooded gold again, and I'll take as many of them with me as I can. He turned to his father. Lady Genevieve needs to be dealt with. Publicly, we need to send a message that attacking Christina means death. Executing a noble without trial would destabilize the entire kingdom, Sergio said carefully. Then give her a trial. But make sure everyone knows what happens to people who threaten my healer. Charles's voice was cold. Because if we show weakness now, the attacks won't stop. They'll escalate. The Alpha King studied his son, this boy who transformed from uncontrolled rage into calculated violence, and realized something both impressive and terrifying. Charles wasn't just protecting Christina because she was useful. He was protecting her because she'd become his, in every way that mattered to a possessive young alpha. And alphas didn't share. They didn't compromise. They defended their own with lethal force. Very well, Sergio said finally. I'll convene the High Court. Lady Genevieve will answer for her crimes. Good. Charles looked back at the assassin one last time. And him? What happens to him? Execution at dawn. Charles nodded, satisfied. Then he left the dungeon without another word, heading back to the royal wing where Christina was waiting. He found her in his study, curled up in an oversized chair with a book she couldn't quite read yet. Her mother sat nearby, mending one of Christina's dresses. When Charles entered, both of them looked up. Is it over? Christina asked quietly. For now. Charles sat down across from her. They caught the person who sent them. She'll be punished. Will more people try? Charles hesitated, then decided she deserved the truth. Probably. Your power is too valuable. Too rare. People will always want to control it. Christina was quiet for a moment. Then she closed her book and looked at him with those unsettling silver eyes. Charles? Do you want to control it too? No. The answer came without hesitation. I want to protect it. There's a difference. What difference? Control means I'd force you to use your power however I wanted. Protection means I make sure no one else can force you. He leaned forward. Your power is yours, Christina. Not mine. Not my father's. Yours. And as long as I'm alive, I'll make sure it stays that way. Why? She tilted her head. Why do you care so much? Charles was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, because before you came, I was drowning. The wolf inside me was winning, and I was so angry all the time, that I couldn't remember what it felt like to be anything else. But you weren't afraid of me. You looked at the monster everyone else saw, and decided I was worth saving." His voice dropped to almost a whisper. No one had ever done that before. "So yeah, I'm possessive. I'm protective. Because you gave me something I didn't know I needed, and I'll be damned if I let anyone take you away." Christina stared at him, something shifting in her young face. "I'm not going anywhere," she said finally. "Even if people try to take me, I'll fight. And if I can't fight, I'll wait. Because you came for me when those men broke into my room, and I know you'll always come." Elva made a small, choked sound. She was crying again, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from watching her 7-year-old daughter and a 10-year-old prince make promises they were both too young to understand the weight of. But they would understand. Eventually. Years later, when Charles pretended to sleep just to catch Christina healing him in the darkness, when he discovered that she'd been secretly using her power to ease his wolf's rage every night for years, when he realized that the girl he'd sworn to protect had been protecting him all along, he would weep, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming knowledge that he'd been loved by someone who asked for nothing in return. And in a world built on power and transaction, that kind of love was the rarest magic of all. Chapter 5. Years of Shadow and Light. 6 years later, Christina Norton was 13 years old the first time she understood what it meant to be owned by a kingdom. She stood in the Hall of Mirrors, a massive chamber where the High Court convened for matters of state, watching nobles argue over her future, as if she were a prize mare instead of a person. Her hands were folded demurely in front of her pale blue dress, her silver eyes downcast, her posture perfect. Everything about her screamed obedient Omega's daughter. It was all a lie. The girl should be sent to the Healer's Academy, Lord Vince Ryan was saying, his alpha pheromones thick with entitlement. Her power is wasted being hoarded by the crown. She should be trained properly, made available to heal the nobility. Made available to you, you mean, interrupted Lady Sonia Phillips, her voice dripping with disdain. Everyone knows your father is dying, Ryan. You want the healer for your own house. And you don't? Ryan shot back. Your son's wolf is unstable. You need her as much as I do. Need is such an ugly word, Lady Phillips purred. I prefer deserve. My family has served this kingdom for generations. Surely we've earned the right to. Enough. Alpha King Sergio's voice cut through the argument like a blade. The nobles fell silent immediately, their heads bowing in automatic deference, but Christina could smell their resentment thick and bitter as spoiled milk. Christina Norton remains under the crown's protection, Sergio said firmly. As she has been for the past 6 years. This discussion is closed. With respect, Your Majesty, Lord Ryan said carefully, Prince Charles will be 17 soon. When he comes of age, he'll need to choose a proper mate, an alpha female who can strengthen his bloodline and help him rule. Surely you don't expect him to waste his bond on a defective Omega's daughter. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Christina kept her eyes down, but she could feel Charles beside her, could feel the way his wolf surged forward, violent and protective. His hand twitched toward the sword at his hip. My son's mating choices are none of your concern, Sergio said coldly. And I would advise you to choose your next words very carefully, Lord Ryan. Insulting someone under my personal protection is insulting me. I meant no offense, Your Majesty. I merely point out the obvious. The girl's lack of designation makes her unsuitable for a royal bond. She can't even produce an heir. Can't she? Lady Phillips's eyes gleamed with malicious curiosity. She's 13 now. Shouldn't she have presented by now? Omega, Beta, Alpha something? All eyes turned to Christina. She forced herself to meet their gazes without flinching. I haven't presented yet, my lady. The pack doctors say it might happen late. Or not at all. Fascinating, murmured Lord Joel Crane, one of the older nobles. A true healer with no designation. I wonder what that means for her fertility. Her ability to bond? Perhaps she's meant to remain neutral, a tool for the kingdom, rather than a person with her own desires. Tool. The word hit Christina like a physical blow, but she kept her face blank. She'd learned over the past 6 years that showing emotion in court was weakness, and weakness invited predators. This discussion is over, Charles said quietly. His voice was calm, controlled, But Christina could hear the wolf underneath, barely leashed, desperate to tear these nobles apart for daring to discuss her like livestock. Christina's designation or lack thereof is irrelevant. She's mine to protect. And that protection doesn't expire when I come of age. It strengthens. A bold claim, Your Highness, Lady Phillips said. But what happens when you take a mate? When you have a queen who doesn't appreciate sharing her king's attention with a childhood companion? Charles smiled, and it was all teeth. Then I won't take a mate who's that insecure. Problem solved. The nobles exchanged glances, some shocked, some calculating. They were starting to understand what Christina had known for years. Charles wasn't going to give her up. Not for politics, not for bloodlines, not for anything. Which made her either the most protected person in the kingdom or the biggest target. Probably both. After court dismissed, Christina escaped to the palace gardens, her sanctuary, when the weight of noble expectations became too much. She found her usual spot beneath an ancient willow tree, its drooping branches creating a curtain of privacy. She'd barely sat down when Charles appeared, pushing through the branches with the ease of someone who'd done it 1,000 times. You shouldn't have defended me like that, Christina said without looking at him. Lady Phillips is already looking for excuses to undermine your claim to the throne. Declaring that you won't take a proper mate just gave her ammunition. I don't care. Charles sat down beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. At 17, he'd grown into the dominant alpha everyone had feared. He'd become 6'3", built like a warrior, with eyes that could go from warm to deadly in a heartbeat. But around Christina, he was still just Charles. They can scheme all they want. You're not going anywhere. You say that now. But what happens when you actually do need to take a mate? When your father starts pressuring you to produce an heir? Christina finally looked at him. I'm not stupid, Charles. I know how this works. Royal alphas need alpha mates. It's tradition, law, biology. Biology also says I shouldn't be able to control my wolf, but here we are. Charles reached out and tucked a strand of dark hair behind her ear, a gesture so familiar it didn't even register as intimate anymore. You think I don't know what you've been doing? All these years? Christina went very still. I don't know what you mean. Yes, you do. His voice softened. Every night, when you think I'm asleep, I can feel it, Christina. The warmth, the calm. You've been using your power on me, haven't you? Soothing my wolf so I don't lose control. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She'd been so careful. So subtle. How long have you known? She whispered. About 2 years. Charles smiled slightly. I'm not as oblivious as you think, and I'm definitely not as good at pretending to sleep as you believe. Christina felt heat flood her cheeks. Why didn't you say anything? Because you were helping me, and I didn't want you to stop. He caught her chin gently, forcing her to meet his eyes. Do you have any idea what you've given me? Before you came, I was a monster waiting to happen. After you, I have control, purpose, a reason to be better than the rage inside me. You would have found control eventually. No. The certainty in his voice was absolute. I wouldn't have. The pack doctors told my father I had maybe 5 years before my wolf consumed me completely. You've bought me 7 so far, and counting. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. So don't tell me you're expendable. Don't tell me I should give you up for politics or tradition. You're the reason I'm still human, Christina. And I'm selfish enough to never let that go. Christina's breath caught. They were too close, suddenly close enough that she could see the gold flecks in his dark eyes. Could smell his alpha scent, cedar and steel, and something uniquely him. Could feel the heat radiating from his body. Charles, she whispered. People are going to talk. They already think. Let them think. He leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching hers. I stopped caring about their opinions the day you saved my life by refusing to be afraid of me. I was terrified of you. But you stayed anyway. That's what mattered. For a long moment, they just stared at each other. Christina was acutely aware of how her heart was racing, how her hands had started to tremble, how something warm and dangerous was unfurling in her chest. She was 13. He was 17. This was, Your Highness, Christina. They jerked apart as Jesse Fuentes, one of Christina's permanent guards, burst through the willow branches, his face pale with urgency. "What is it?" Charles was on his feet instantly, his hand on his sword. "It's Elva," Jesse panted. "She collapsed in the kitchens. The healers say it's her heart. She's asking for Christina." Christina's world tilted. "Mama?" She was running before anyone could stop her, her feet flying across the garden paths toward the servant's wing. Charles kept pace beside her easily, his longer legs eating up the distance. By the time they reached her mother's room, Christina's chest was burning and tears were streaming down her face. Elva lay on a narrow bed, her skin gray, her breathing shallow. The pack doctor, an elderly beta named Andrea Bautista, stood beside her, mixing something that smelled bitter and medicinal. "Mama!" Christina dropped to her knees beside the bed, reaching for her mother's hand. Elva's eyes fluttered open, focusing on her daughter with difficulty. "Little star," she whispered. "You came." "Of course I came." Christina's hands were already glowing, golden light pooling in her palms. "I'm going to fix this. Just hold on." "No." Elva's grip tightened weakly. "Don't waste your power on me." "What?" "Mama, don't be stupid. I can." "You can't." Dr. Bautista's voice was gentle but firm. "I'm sorry, Christina. But your mother's heart has been failing for months. She's been hiding it, working through the pain. By the time we noticed, the damage was too severe. Even your gift has limits." "That's not true." Christina's voice rose, panic clawing at her throat. "I healed the Alpha King. I've healed stab wounds and broken bones, and acute injuries, yes. But chronic deterioration, organs that have been slowly dying for months." The doctor shook her head. "Your power can't rebuild what's already too far gone." "I'm sorry." "No." Christina pressed her glowing hands against her mother's chest anyway, pouring every ounce of power she had into the dying woman. "No. No. No. You're wrong. I can save her. I have to save her. I have to." "Christina." Elva's hand touched her daughter's cheek. "Baby, stop. It's okay." "It's not okay. You're dying. Everyone dies, little star." Elva smiled, even as tears leaked from the corners of her eyes. "But I got 13 beautiful years with you. 13 years watching you grow strong and brave and powerful. That's more than I ever dreamed I'd have." "Don't." Christina was sobbing now, her power flickering and dying as exhaustion took hold. "Don't say goodbye. Please don't say goodbye. I love you." Elva's breathing was getting shallower. "And I'm so proud of you. So proud of the woman you're becoming." Her eyes shifted to Charles, who stood in the doorway with an expression of helpless rage. "Prince Charles, promise me you'll protect her. Promise me she won't end up like the last healer." "I promise," Charles said hoarsely. "On my life, I promise. Thank you." Elva's gaze returned to Christina. "Be happy, little star. Don't let this power make you forget how to be happy, Mama." But Elva's eyes had already closed. Her chest rose once more, then went still. The silence that followed was deafening. Christina felt something inside her crack, something fundamental and irreparable. The golden light in her hands sputtered and died. And when she opened her mouth, the sound that came out was barely human. It was the sound of a child's heart breaking. Charles was beside her in an instant, pulling her away from the body, wrapping his arms around her as she collapsed against his chest. She screamed and sobbed and clawed at him, trying to break free, trying to go back to her mother, trying to undo what couldn't be undone. But he held her through it all, steady and unbreakable the way he'd held her that first night when she'd nearly lost control of her power. "I've got you," he murmured into her hair. "I've got you, Christina. I'm not letting go." And he didn't. Not that night, as she cried herself into exhaustion. Not the next day, when they burned her mother's body in accordance with pack tradition. Not in the weeks that followed, when Christina stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped glowing. Charles stayed, because 6 years ago, a 7-year-old girl had looked at a monster and decided he was worth saving. And now, a 17-year-old alpha was learning what it meant to return the favor. Chapter 6. The Poison of Temptation. 3 months after Elva's death, Christina stopped healing. Not because she'd lost her power, the golden light still flickered beneath her skin whenever she tried to summon it, But because every time she reached for that warmth, all she could see was her mother's gray face, her failing heart, the way her power had been utterly devastatingly useless. What good was being a true healer if you couldn't save the one person who mattered most? Charles noticed, of course. He noticed everything about her. "You need to eat," he said one evening, standing in the doorway of her room with a tray of food. It was the 5th meal he'd brought her that week. The previous 4 sat untouched on her desk, growing cold. "I'm not hungry." Christina didn't look up from the book she wasn't reading. "You haven't eaten in 2 days. You're going to make yourself sick." "Good." The tray hit the desk with a sharp clatter. "Don't do that. Don't be careless with yourself just because you're hurting." "Why not?" Christina finally looked at him, and her silver eyes were dull, empty. "What's the point of taking care of myself? What's the point of anything? I have this incredible power, and I couldn't save the one person who actually mattered." "Christina, she's dead, Charles. My mother is dead, and I did nothing." Her voice cracked. "I can heal stab wounds and broken bones, and whatever Alpha gets into a stupid fight, but I couldn't save my own mother. What kind of healer does that make me?" "It makes you human." Charles crossed the room and sat on the edge of her bed. "Your power has limits. That doesn't make you a failure, doesn't it?" Christina's hands clenched into fists. "The nobles are already whispering. I heard them at court last week. What good is a healer who can't even save her own mother? They're starting to question whether I'm worth protecting. Let them question. Their opinions don't matter. They matter to your father. They matter to the stability of your future reign." She looked away. "Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm not worth the trouble I cause." Charles's hand shot out, gripping her chin and forcing her to look at him. His eyes had flooded gold, his wolf rising to the surface with that possessive intensity she'd come to recognize. "Don't," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Don't you dare say you're not worth it. You've kept me sane for 6 years. You've given me control when everyone said I'd become a monster. You've been the only real thing in this palace of lies and politics. So don't tell me you're not worth protecting, because I'll burn this entire kingdom down before I let anyone take you from me." Christina stared at him, her breath catching. "Charles, you can't mean that." "I mean every word." His grip softened, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "I know you're grieving. I know you're hurting. But you don't get to give up. Not when I've spent 6 years fighting to keep you safe." "I'm tired of being safe," Christina whispered. "I'm tired of being protected like I'm made of glass. I'm tired of nobles treating me like property, and you treating me like—" She stopped, but the words hung between them anyway, "like someone you have to save instead of someone you want." Charles's expression shifted, something vulnerable flickering across his features before he could hide it. "Is that what you think? That I protect you out of obligation? Don't you?" Christina pulled away from his touch, wrapping her arms around herself. "I'm useful. I keep your wolf stable. I'm a political asset. Of course you protect me. It's logical, Christina." "It's fine, Charles. I understand how this works. I'm valuable. So you keep me close. When I stop being valuable, you'll find someone else." Her voice went flat. "Just like everyone else in this kingdom, you only care because of what I can do, not who I am." The silence that followed was suffocating. Then Charles stood, and when he spoke, his voice was rough, with barely controlled emotion. "You think that's why I stay? Because you're useful?" He turned to face her, and the raw intensity in his eyes made Christina's chest tighten. "I was 12 years old when I realized I loved you," he said quietly. "You were 9, we were in the garden, and you were trying to teach yourself how to read pack law because you wanted to understand the kingdom better. You had ink smudges all over your face, and you were so frustrated because the words were too big, but you refused to give up." He took a step closer. "I looked at you, this stubborn, brilliant little girl who'd chosen to stay beside a monster everyone else feared, and I thought, this is the person I want to spend my life protecting. Not because you were useful, not because you could heal me, but because you made me want to be better than the rage inside me." Christina's heart hammered against her ribs. "Charles, I'm not finished." Another step. "Every year, since then, it's gotten worse. Or better. I don't know anymore. All I know is that when you walk into a room, my wolf settles in a way it doesn't for anyone else. When you're hurt, I feel it like someone's tearing out my chest. And when you talk about not being worth it, about giving up, about letting the nobles decide your value," his hands clenched into fists. "It takes everything I have not to lock you away somewhere they can never touch you. Not because you're valuable to the kingdom. Because you're valuable to me. Because losing you would break something in me that even your healing couldn't fix." Christina couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. "You're 17. I'm 13. This is, I know." Charles's laugh was bitter. "Believe me, I know. I know I'm too old for you right now. I know you see me as a protector, maybe a friend, but nothing more. I know that what I feel is completely one-sided, and probably inappropriate and definitely against about 50 different pack laws about alphas and unmarked. It's not one-sided." The words escaped before Christina could stop them. Charles froze. "What?" "It's not one-sided," Christina repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't think you. I thought I was just." She struggled to find words for feelings she didn't fully understand. "When you hold me, I feel safe. When you're angry, I want to calm you. When you smile at me like I'm the only person in the world who matters, She stopped, heat flooding her cheeks. "You what?" Charles's voice had gone soft. "Dangerous. I forget that I'm supposed to be just your ward. Just the girl you protect because your father told you to." Christina forced herself to meet his eyes. "But I'm 13. Charles. I don't know what I feel or what it means, or if it's even real. And you're going to be king. And you'll need a proper mate. And..." "Stop." Charles crossed the remaining distance between them in 2 strides, cupping her face in his hands. "Stop planning out all the reasons this can't work, and just be honest with me. Right now. Do you want me to leave you alone? To stop being so protective? To treat you like just another ward?" "No," Christina admitted, "but I don't know what I want instead." "That's okay." His forehead touched hers, and his voice dropped to barely a murmur. "You're 13. You don't have to know. You just have to promise me something." "What?" "Promise me you won't give up. Not on yourself, not on your power. Not on the possibility that someday when you're older, when you understand what you want, you might choose me. Not because I'm your protector or because it's politically convenient, but because you actually want to." Christina's eyes burned with unshed tears. "Charles, promise me, Christina. I promise." The words came out broken, but sincere. "I won't give up." "Good." Charles pulled back slightly, and his expression was fierce. "Because I'm going to wait for you. However long it takes. And when you're ready, when you're old enough to make your own choices without anyone pressuring you, I'm going to ask you to be mine. Not as a ward, not as a political asset, but as my equal, my partner, my..." He stopped himself, as if the next word was too big to say out loud, but Christina heard it anyway, hanging in the air between them like a promise and a prayer. "Mate." The next morning, Christina woke to find a letter slipped under her door. The seal was unfamiliar, a serpent coiled around a rose. Her hands trembled slightly as she broke the wax and unfolded the parchment. "Dear true healer, your mother's death was unfortunate but necessary. She was a weakness, a reminder that you come from common blood, but weakness can be shed like old skin. You have power beyond imagination, yet you waste it playing companion to a violent prince. You could be a queen in your own right. You could rule nations. You could make the nobility bow before you instead of treating you like property. I can teach you how. Meet me in the Eastern Garden at midnight 3 days from now. Come alone. Tell no one, especially not your guard dog prince. If you do, the opportunity will vanish, and you'll spend the rest of your life wondering what you could have become. Choose wisely, little healer. Choose power. A friend." Christina read the letter 3 times, her mind racing. It was obviously a trap, obviously dangerous, obviously something Charles would never allow if he knew. But, "You could be a queen in your own right." The words burrowed into her brain, seductive and poisonous. What if the letter was right? What if she didn't have to be just Charles's ward? Just the kingdom's tool, just a girl defined by her usefulness to others. What if she could be more? She should tell Charles immediately. Should show him the letter and let him deal with whoever was trying to manipulate her. But when she looked at the letter again, at the promise of power, of choice, of becoming something more than the fragile thing everyone kept trying to protect. She folded it carefully and hid it in the false bottom of her jewelry box. Just for now, she told herself. Just until she decided what to do. She didn't know that the letter had been written by someone who understood exactly how to break a grieving girl. She didn't know that the friend who'd written it had been watching her for months, studying her weaknesses, planning how to turn the kingdom's greatest asset into its most devastating weapon. And she didn't know that in 3 days, when she snuck out to that garden meeting, she'd set in motion a chain of events that would shatter everything Charles had spent years building. But she'd learn. They both would. Because sometimes the most dangerous traps are the ones that promise to set you free. Chapter 7. The Serpent's Offer. The Eastern Garden was forbidden territory after dark. Christina knew this. Every servant, every guard, every member of the palace knew that the Eastern Garden, with its labyrinth of hedge walls and ancient statuary, became something else when the sun set. A place where shadows moved wrong, where whispers seemed to come from nowhere, where 3 servants had vanished over the past decade, their bodies never found. But fear felt distant compared to the hunger growing inside her. The hunger to be more than protected, more than useful, more than grieving. She slipped out of her room at midnight, moving through the servants' passages she'd memorized years ago. Jessie and Roberta were stationed outside Charles's quarters. The prince had insisted on keeping them close after the assassination attempt, which meant her own room was unwatched. An oversight Charles would be furious about later. If there was a later. Christina pushed the thought away and focused on moving silently through the darkened palace. The letter was tucked inside her sleeve, its presence both comforting and terrifying. She'd almost told Charles a dozen times over the past 3 days. Almost showed him the letter and let him handle it. But every time she opened her mouth, she remembered the way the nobles looked at her. Like property, like a tool, like something to be used and discarded when its usefulness expired. You could be a queen in your own right. The words had infected her thoughts like poison, honey, sweet, and deadly. The Eastern Garden's gate was unlocked, which should have been her first warning. Christina hesitated, her hand on the cold iron, her instincts screaming at her to turn back. But she pushed the gate open anyway and stepped into the labyrinth. The garden was exactly as the rumors described, beautiful and wrong, in equal measure. Moonlight filtered through ancient trees, casting twisted shadows across manicured paths. Stone statues of long-dead pack members seemed to watch her pass, their eyes dark hollows. The air smelled of night-blooming jasmine and something else, something metallic and old. Blood, Christina realized. The garden smelled faintly of blood. She almost turned back then, almost ran, but a voice stopped her. You came. The woman who stepped out from behind a marble fountain was breathtaking, tall and elegant, with hair like spun silver and eyes the color of amber. She wore a dress that seemed to be made of shadows themselves, and her scent powerful, intoxicating, undeniably alpha, washed over Christina like a wave. Who are you? Christina asked, forcing her voice steady. You may call me Rebecca Price. The woman smiled, and it was the kind of smile that made Christina think of wolves before they struck. Though my name doesn't matter nearly as much as what I can offer you. The letter said you could teach me. Teach me what? How to stop being a victim. Rebecca circled slowly, studying Christina like she was a particularly interesting specimen. Tell me, child, how does it feel to have the rarest power in the kingdom and still be treated like property? To save lives and receive nothing but fear and greed in return. I'm protected, Christina said automatically. The Alpha King uses you to keep his violent son under control. Yes, I know. Rebecca's voice was silk over steel. And Prince Charles? He protects you so thoroughly that you can't breathe without his permission. Tell me, when was the last time you made a choice that was truly yours? Christina's hands clenched. Charles doesn't control me, doesn't he? Rebecca stopped circling, standing directly in front of Christina now. Where you sleep, who you see, how you use your power. Every aspect of your life has been carefully managed by the crown since you were 6 years old. You call it protection. I call it a cage. Better a cage than dead. Christina shot back. The assassination attempts would stop if you were powerful enough to defend yourself. Rebecca's eyes gleamed. That's what I'm offering, Christina Norton. Not protection. Power. Real power. The kind that makes others fear to touch you. The kind that makes you untouchable. Despite herself, Christina felt interest stir. How? Your gift is wasted on healing. Rebecca's voice dropped to an intimate whisper. True healers are rare because the moon goddess blessed so few with the ability to manipulate life force itself. But healing is only half of what you can do. You can also take life, drain it, transfer it, become something the kingdom has never seen before. Christina's breath caught. That's dark magic. That's forbidden. Dark magic is just power that frightens small minds. Rebecca reached out, her fingers hovering just above Christina's cheek without quite touching. You felt it, didn't you? When you knocked out that assassin 6 years ago. When your power lashed out defensively. That wasn't healing. That was raw life force manipulation. You drained him to protect yourself. I didn't mean to, but you could learn to. You could learn to take strength from your enemies and add it to your own. You could become immortal, Christina, unkillable, a goddess in human form. Rebecca's smile widened, and then no one, not the nobles, not the king, not even your precious Prince Charles could ever control you again. The offer hung in the air between them, seductive and terrible. Why? Christina asked. Why would you teach me this? What do you get out of it? Honesty. How refreshing. Rebecca laughed softly. I want what everyone in this kingdom wants, power. But unlike the others, I'm smart enough to know I can't take it from you. You're too well protected. Too valuable. So instead, I offer you a partnership. You become powerful enough to stand on your own, and in return, you remember who gave you that power when you're standing over the ashes of those who tried to use you. You want revenge against the kingdom. I want justice. Rebecca's expression hardened. 23 years ago, the nobles of this kingdom tore apart the last true healer fighting over who would own her. She was my sister, Christina. They destroyed her so thoroughly that by the time she died, she was begging for it. Begging for someone to end her suffering. Christina felt ice slide down her spine. The Alpha King said. The Alpha King did nothing to stop it. He was just the crown prince then, too young to interfere. But he watched it happen. He let them destroy her. And now he's doing the same to you, just more slowly, more carefully. But the end result will be the same. You'll be used up and discarded, and he'll tell himself he did his best. No. Christina shook her head. Charles would never. Charles is 17 and thinks he's in love with you. Rebecca's voice turned gentle, pitying. But love doesn't conquer politics, child. When he becomes king, when the pressure to produce heirs mounts, when the nobles demand he take a proper alpha mate, he'll choose the kingdom over you. They always do. The words hit like physical blows because Christina had thought them herself. Late at night, when Charles's declarations of protection felt more like chains than comfort, when she watched noble daughters parade through court, beautiful and powerful and suitable in ways she'd never be. I need time to think, Christina said. Of course. But not too much time. Rebecca pulled a small vial from her dress. The glass was black, the liquid inside darker. If you decide you want what I'm offering, drink this at midnight exactly 1 week from now. It will unlock the full potential of your power. The darker aspects. The dangerous ones. And it will show you exactly what you're capable of. When you stop limiting yourself to healing. She pressed the vial into Christina's hand. The glass was warm, almost alive. 1 week, Rebecca repeated. And Christina? Tell your guard dog prince about this meeting if you want. But ask yourself first, will he support your choice to become more powerful, or will he see it as a threat to his control over you? Then she was gone, dissolving into shadows like she'd never been there at all. Christina stood alone in the eastern garden, clutching a vial of liquid darkness. And for the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to be truly tempted. She made it back to her room without being seen, or so she thought. The moment she closed her door, a voice spoke from the darkness. Where were you? Christina's heart stopped. She spun to find Charles sitting in the chair by her window, his eyes reflecting moonlight like a predator's. He must have been waiting for hours. Charles, don't lie to me. He stood slowly, and the controlled fury radiating from him made her want to step back. Jesse came to check on you an hour ago. Found your room empty. I've been sitting here ever since, trying to convince myself you hadn't done something stupid. His eyes dropped to her hand, to the black vial she'd forgotten she was holding. What is that? Christina's mind raced. She could lie. Could hide the vial and pretend she'd just been walking the gardens, unable to sleep. Could protect the secret Rebecca had given her. But looking at Charles's face at the fear and betrayal written there, she found she couldn't. I got a letter, she said quietly. 3 days ago. Someone wanted to meet me. To offer me something. Show me. Christina retrieved the letter from her jewelry box with trembling hands. Charles read it in silence, and with each passing second his expression grew darker. When he finished, he crumpled the letter in his fist. You went anyway. His voice was flat, dangerous. After everything, after the assassination attempts, after 6 years of me fighting to keep you safe, you snuck out alone to meet a stranger offering you dark power. I wasn't in danger. You don't know that. Charles's control shattered, his voice rising. You don't know who that woman is or what she really wants. She could have killed you, kidnapped you, tortured you for information about the palace defenses, and I would have found out when they delivered your body. His hands were shaking. Not with rage, but with fear. I was careful, Christina said. Careful? Charles laughed, sharp and bitter. You call meeting a stranger who promises to make you powerful careful? What happened to trusting me? What happened to us being partners? We're not partners. The words exploded out of Christina before she could stop them. You're my protector, my guard, the person who decides what's safe for me and what isn't. But you're not my partner, Charles, because partners make decisions together, and you make all the decisions about my life without ever asking what I actually want. Charles stared at her like she'd slapped him. That's not fair, isn't it? Christina's voice cracked. You decide where I sleep, who I talk to, how I use my power. You surround me with guards and walls and rules, and you call it protection. But it feels like prison, Charles. It feels like I'm still that 6-year-old girl you decided to save. Except I'm not 6 anymore. I'm 13, and I'm suffocating. So what? You'd rather risk your life for some stranger's promise of power? I'd rather have a choice. Christina held up the vial. This woman, Rebecca Price, she told me I could be more than just a healer. More than just your stabilizer. More than just valuable. She said I could be powerful. Untouchable. And for the first time since my mother died, I felt like maybe I didn't have to be the fragile thing everyone keeps trying to protect. Charles was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was rough. Is that what you think? That I see you as fragile? Don't you? Christina's eyes burned. You won't let me train with weapons. Won't let me learn to fight. Won't let me attend court without you. You treat me like I'm made of glass. And I'm tired of it. I treat you like someone I can't bear to lose. Charles crossed the distance between them in 3 strides, gripping her shoulders. You want honesty? Fine. Here's honesty. You're the only person in this entire kingdom who makes me want to be better than the monster I am. When you're in danger, my wolf goes insane. When you're hurt, I feel it like someone's tearing out my heart. And the thought of you drinking some mystery potion from a stranger who claims to want to help you, his voice broke. It terrifies me, Christina. Because I know what happens to true healers, who try to become more than healers. I know what happens when someone tries to manipulate life force beyond its intended purpose. They go mad, they become corrupted, they destroy everything they touch. Or maybe they become powerful enough to protect themselves, Christina said softly. At what cost? Charles's hands tightened on her shoulders. Don't you understand? I don't want you to be powerful enough that you don't need me. I want you to be powerful with me. As my equal. He stopped himself, but again, the unspoken word hung between them. Mate. Christina looked down at the vial in her hand. At the promise of power and independence and freedom from being anyone's ward, anyone's responsibility, anyone's weakness. Then she looked at Charles, at the fear and love warring in his expression, and felt something crack inside her chest. I don't know what to do, she whispered. I don't know who to trust anymore. Trust yourself. Charles's voice gentled. Whatever you decide, whatever choice you make it because it's what you want. Not because I'm pressuring you, not because some stranger offered you empty promises, but because deep down, you know it's right. He released her shoulders and stepped back, giving her space. I'm going to leave now. And whatever you decide to do with that vial, drink it, destroy it, keep it, it's your choice. I won't stop you. I won't judge you. I'll just be here, waiting, like I always have been. He walked to the door, then paused with his hand on the handle. But Christina, if you do drink it, if you do choose that path. He looked back at her, and his eyes were ancient with sorrow. Remember that power always has a price, and sometimes the cost is everything you never wanted to lose. Then he was gone, leaving Christina alone with a vial of darkness and the weight of an impossible choice. Chapter 8. The Night of Truth. 6 days passed like slow torture. Christina carried the black vial everywhere, hidden in a pocket she'd sewn into her dress. Its presence was a constant weight, a reminder of the choice she still hadn't made. Drink it and become powerful enough to stand alone. Destroy it and remain forever dependent on Charles's protection. Both options felt like betrayal. Of herself, of him, of everything they'd built together over 7 years. Charles, true to his word, didn't pressure her. But she could feel his eyes on her, constantly watching, waiting, silently terrified of what she might choose. The tension between them was suffocating. They spoke in careful pleasantries. They avoided being alone together. They pretended everything was fine. It was the worst kind of lie. On the 6th night, Christina couldn't sleep. She wandered the palace halls in her nightgown, the vial burning against her hip, her mind spinning in endless circles. Power always has a price. Charles's words echoed through her thoughts. But so did Rebecca's. You could be a queen in your own right. She found herself in the library, that quiet sanctuary, where she'd spent so many hours learning to read, to think, to understand the world beyond the servants' quarters. The moon cast silver light through tall windows, illuminating rows of ancient texts. And there, sitting in her favorite window seat, was Charles. He looked up when she entered, surprise flickering across his features. Christina, I thought you'd be asleep. I could say the same about you. She hesitated in the doorway, suddenly unsure. Should I go? I don't want to intrude. You're never an intrusion. Charles shifted, making space beside him. Sit. Please. She crossed the room slowly and settled into the window seat, careful to maintain distance between them. For a long moment, they just sat in silence, watching moonlight paint shadows across the floor. Tomorrow's the deadline, Christina said finally. Midnight. That's when Rebecca said to drink it. I know. Charles's voice was carefully neutral. Have you decided? No. Maybe. I don't know. She pulled the vial from her pocket, holding it up to the moonlight. The liquid inside seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Part of me wants to destroy it. Pretend this never happened. Go back to how things were. But things can't go back, can they? Christina looked at him. Not after my mother died. Not after I realized how helpless I really am. Not after... She stopped, but he finished for her. Not after you realized I'm in love with you. The words hung between them, raw and honest. Charles, it's okay. He smiled, but it was sad. You don't have to say anything. I shouldn't have told you. You're too young, and I put pressure on you that you didn't need. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Christina's voice cracked. You're the only person in this entire kingdom who's ever been honest with me about what you want. Everyone else just uses me, takes what they need and pretends it's for my own good. But you, she struggled to find words for the tangle of emotions in her chest. You told me you'd wait, that you'd let me choose, that you'd respect whatever I decided, even if it meant losing me. Do you have any idea how rare that is? Not rare enough, Charles said quietly. You should have had that from everyone. Not just me. But I didn't. I had you. Christina looked down at the vial again. That's what makes this so hard. If I drink this, if I become what Rebecca promises I can be, I won't need you anymore. Not to protect me. Not to keep me stable. Not for anything. And you think that would make me leave? Wouldn't it? She forced herself to meet his eyes. If I'm not the fragile thing you need to protect, if I'm not the healer who keeps your wolf stable, if I'm just powerful on my own. What reason would you have to stay? Charles stared at her for a long moment. Then he did something completely unexpected. He laughed. Not a cruel laugh, not mocking, but genuine, startled amusement mixed with something that sounded like relief. "Christina Norton," he said, shaking his head. "You're the smartest person I know, and somehow you've convinced yourself of the stupidest thing imaginable. What? You think I stay because you need me?" Charles shifted closer, his expression intense. "You think the reason I've spent 7 years fighting to keep you safe is because you're useful? Because you stabilize my wolf? Because you're fragile? Isn't it? No." The certainty in his voice was absolute. "I stay because when you walk into a room, my world makes sense. I stay because your laugh sounds like everything good I never thought I'd deserve. I stay because you looked at a 10-year-old monster and decided he was worth saving, and that choice changed everything about who I was going to become." He took her hand, the one not holding the vial, and pressed it against his chest, over his heart. "Feel that? The way my heart races when you're near? That's not obligation. That's not political strategy. That's not me protecting an asset. That's me being completely, pathetically in love with someone who's too young to understand what that means yet." Christina felt tears prick her eyes. "Charles, if you drink that vial and become the most powerful person in the kingdom, I'll still love you. If you destroy it and stay exactly as you are, I'll still love you. If you decide tomorrow that you hate me and never want to see me again, I'll still love you from a distance." His voice dropped to a whisper. "You could be weak or strong, powerful or powerless, broken or whole, and I would still choose you. Every time. Forever." The tears spilled over now, tracking down Christina's cheeks. "That's not fair. I know. You can't just say things like that and expect me to think clearly. I'm not trying to manipulate you." Charles released her hand, giving her space again. "I'm trying to make you understand that whatever you choose tomorrow, whatever path you take, you're not going to lose me. The only way you lose me is if you die. And even then, I'd probably find a way to follow you into whatever comes after." Christina wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "You're ridiculous. I'm honest." He smiled slightly. "There's a difference." They sat in silence for a few minutes, the weight of everything said and unsaid settling around them like a blanket. Finally, Christina spoke. "Rebecca said her sister was the last true healer, the one the nobles destroyed 23 years ago." Charles went very still. "Did she? She wants revenge. Or justice. Maybe both." Christina turned the vial over in her hands. "She told me the Alpha King, your father, watched it happen and did nothing to stop it. He was 18, barely more than a boy himself, with no real power yet." Charles's jaw tightened. "But yes, he watched it happen, and it's haunted him ever since. That's why he protects you so fiercely now. Why he's willing to go to war with the noble houses to keep you safe. He's trying to atone for past failures. And you? Are you trying to atone for something too?" "No." Charles looked at her directly. "I'm trying to prevent something. I'm trying to make sure that in 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, I'm not standing over your grave wishing I'd fought harder, loved better, protected you more." Christina's breath caught. "What if protecting me means letting me make dangerous choices? Then I'll stand beside you while you make them." His voice was firm. "But I won't lie and tell you drinking that vial is safe. Rebecca Price is dangerous, Christina. She's offering you power, but power fueled by what? Pain? Death? The life force of others? That kind of magic corrupts. It changes you into something you don't recognize." "How do you know?" "Because I live with a monster inside me every day." Charles's eyes flashed gold briefly. "I know what it's like to have power that wants to destroy everything you love. And I wouldn't wish that on anyone, especially not you." Christina looked down at the vial, really studying it for the first time. The liquid inside seemed to move of its own accord, sluggish and wrong, and now that she was paying attention, she could feel it, a faint pulse of something dark and hungry emanating from the glass. "Tell me something honestly," she said. "If I drink this and it does corrupt me, if I become something dark and terrible, would you still love me?" Charles didn't hesitate. "Yes. But I'd spend every day fighting to bring you back to yourself, even if it took a lifetime. Even if you hated me for it." "That sounds exhausting." Love usually is. He smiled slightly. But you're worth the exhaustion. Christina turned the vial over one more time, feeling its weight, its promise, its threat. Then she made her choice. Midnight came. Christina stood in the eastern garden, alone as Rebecca had requested. The vial was clutched in her hand, warm against her palm. Above, the full moon cast silver light across the labyrinth of hedges and statues. Right on schedule, Rebecca Price emerged from the shadows. You came, she said, satisfaction evident in her voice. And you brought the vial. Does this mean you've made your choice? I have. Christina held up the black glass, watching moonlight fail to penetrate the liquid inside. You said this would make me powerful. Untouchable. A queen in my own right. It will. Rebecca's eyes gleamed. Drink it now, at the height of the full moon, and you'll feel power like nothing you've ever imagined. You'll finally be free of everyone who's tried to control you. Free, Christina repeated softly. That's what you promised. Freedom. Yes, but that's not what this is. Is it? Christina's voice hardened. This isn't freedom. It's just trading one cage for another. Trading Charles's protection for your manipulation. Trading the kingdom's expectations for your revenge plot. Rebecca's expression shifted, growing cold. What are you saying, child? I'm saying I figured it out. Christina's hands began to glow, not with golden healing light, but with silver moonlight that seemed to come from somewhere deeper. You don't want to help me become powerful. You want to use me as a weapon against the kingdom that destroyed your sister. You want me to drink this corruption, become addicted to dark power, and then you'll control me the same way the nobles tried to control her. You're making a mistake. No. Christina's voice rang with absolute certainty. The mistake would be believing that power gained through darkness could ever set me free. My mother taught me that true strength comes from choosing who you protect, not from how much you can destroy. She raised the vial high. So here's my choice, Rebecca Price. Here's my answer to your offer of corruption and revenge and borrowed power. Christina threw the vial to the ground with all her strength. It shattered. Black liquid spread across the stones, hissing and smoking like acid. Where it touched living plants, they withered instantly. Where it touched stone, cracks spread like spiderwebs. The garden itself seemed to recoil from the darkness, as if nature recognized poison when it saw it. You foolish child. Rebecca's composure shattered along with the vial. Do you have any idea what you just destroyed? The years of research, the sacrifices required to create that. I know exactly what I destroyed. Christina stood her ground as Rebecca advanced, her silver eyes blazing. I destroyed your attempt to turn me into another tragedy. Another cautionary tale. Another true healer, destroyed by people who wanted to use her. You'll regret this, Rebecca snarled, her alpha pheromones flooding the garden with dominance. But Christina didn't bow. Didn't break. The silver light around her intensified, pure and clean, the opposite of the darkness that had been in the vial. And for the first time, Christina understood what she really was. Not broken, not defective, not waiting to present as alpha, beta, or omega. She was other, something the moon goddess had created specifically to balance the darkness in the world. A light that couldn't be corrupted or controlled, because its entire purpose was to heal, not harm. I don't regret it, Christina said softly. I regret listening to you in the first place. I regret doubting the people who actually care about me. But this? Choosing light over darkness? Choosing healing over destruction? I'll never regret that. Then you'll die like my sister did. Rebecca's hands shifted into claws. Weak. Helpless. Dependent on others for protection you'll never truly have. Maybe, Christina smiled slightly. Or maybe I'll live long enough to prove that being a true healer, being someone who gives life instead of taking it, is the strongest thing anyone can be. Rebecca lunged, and Charles stepped out of the shadows, catching the woman's wrist before her claws could reach Christina's throat. Touch her, he said quietly, his eyes burning gold, and I'll tear you apart so slowly that you'll beg for death before I'm halfway done. Around them, a dozen royal guards emerged from hiding spots throughout the garden. Jesse and Roberto materialized at Christina's sides, their weapons drawn, and at the garden gate the Alpha King himself stood watching, his expression grave. Rebecca looked around, realizing she was surrounded, trapped. You planned this, she whispered, staring at Christina. You knew I'd come. You knew, and you set a trap. No, Christina said. I destroyed the vial because it was the right thing to do. But yes, I told Charles everything before I came tonight, because that's what partners do. They trust each other, they protect each other, and they don't keep secrets that could get one of them killed. She stepped closer to Charles, and he immediately wrapped an arm around her shoulders, protective, possessive, proud. You offered me power, Christina continued. But you were wrong about what I needed. I don't need to be untouchable. I don't need to be a queen. I just need to be me, someone who heals instead of harms, who builds instead of destroys, who chooses light even when darkness is easier. And if that makes me weak in your eyes, she shrugged. Then I'll be weak. But I'll be weak on my own terms. Surrounded by people who love me, instead of powerful and alone with only revenge to keep me warm. Rebecca stared at her for a long moment, then she laughed, sharp and bitter. You're a fool, true healer, just like my sister was, and you'll end up just like her, destroyed by the very people you're trying to protect. Maybe, Charles said softly, but she'll have me standing between her and that fate. And I promise you, I'm a lot harder to destroy than you think. The Alpha King stepped forward then, his guards closing in around Rebecca. Rebecca Price, he said formally. You are charged with attempted corruption of a true healer, conspiracy to undermine the crown, and the murder of 3 servants who discovered your presence in the Eastern Garden. You will be held in the dungeons to await trial. As the guards dragged her away, Rebecca looked back one last time at Christina. The nobles will still come for you, she called out. The assassination attempts will continue. Your precious prince can't protect you forever. And when he fails, when you're bleeding out and alone, you'll remember this moment. You'll remember that I offered you a way to save yourself, and you chose weakness instead. Then she was gone, hauled off to face whatever justice the crown would deliver. Christina sagged against Charles, suddenly exhausted. The silver light around her flickered and died. Without the adrenaline of confrontation, she felt hollow, drained. You did it, Charles murmured into her hair. You chose. I chose you, Christina whispered back. I chose us. I just hope it's enough. It will be. Charles held her tighter. I'll make sure of it. But as they left the Eastern Garden together, neither of them saw the black liquid that had spilled from the broken vial slowly seeping into the ground. Neither of them noticed how the earth seemed to drink it in, hungry and dark. And neither of them could have known that, in destroying the vial, Christina had inadvertently released something far worse than corruption. She'd released the hunger. And hunger, once awakened, was very hard to put back to sleep. Chapter 9. What Hunger Costs. 3 weeks after the Eastern Garden, people started dying. The first victim was a kitchen servant, a young beta named Andrea, who'd been perfectly healthy when she went to bed and stone cold when they found her the next morning. No marks, no poison, no explanation, just a body drained of color, her face frozen in an expression of absolute terror. The second victim was one of the stable hands, then a junior guard, then a visiting merchant's daughter, who'd been staying in the guest wing. All of them died the same way, healthy one moment, corpses the next, their bodies showing no signs of injury but looking somehow less diminished, as if something vital had been sucked right out of them. By the time the 5th body turned up, the palace was in panic. Life force depletion, Dr. Bautista announced grimly, standing over the latest victim in the palace infirmary. Someone or something is draining the life force directly from these people, leaving nothing but empty shells. Alpha King Sergio's face was grave. Could it be a rogue? A vampire? Some creature that's gotten into the palace? Vampires are myths, Your Majesty. And rogues kill violently, they don't drain life force. The doctor looked at him meaningfully. This is magic. Dark magic. The kind that was used to create. She stopped, but everyone in the room understood. The kind of magic that had been in Rebecca's vial. All eyes turned to Christina, who stood beside Charles in the corner of the infirmary. She'd gone pale, her silver eyes wide with horror. No, she whispered. I destroyed it. I shattered the vial. It's gone. The vial is gone, the doctor agreed carefully. But the liquid inside, where did it go, child? into the ground. It soaked into the earth. Christina's hands trembled. I thought it would just disappear. Neutralize. Something. Dark magic doesn't disappear, Dr. Bautista said. It transforms. Adapts. And if that corruption soaked into the ground in the Eastern Garden into a place already steeped in death and shadow, it could have manifested as something else. Something hungry. A revenant, Charles said quietly. You think we're dealing with a revenant? The room went silent. Revenants were nightmares made flesh spirits of the dead animated by dark magic, driven by an insatiable hunger for life force. They looked human until they fed, then their true nature showed. Corpse-gray skin, black eyes, mouths that opened too wide to drain the living. They were nearly impossible to kill because they were already dead. That's impossible, one of the guards protested. Revenants haven't been seen in this kingdom for over a century. The old magic that created them is apparently alive and well in vials carried by vengeful alphas, Charles finished bitterly. He looked at his father. We need to evacuate the palace, get everyone to safety while we hunt this thing. And cause kingdom-wide panic? Sergio shook his head. We'll have riots. Chaos. The noble houses will use this as proof that the crown can't protect its own people. Better panic than corpses piling up in our halls. Your Highness is right, Dr. Bautista interjected. If we don't stop this quickly, we'll have an epidemic. Revenants can create more of their kind by draining victims partially, instead of completely. One revenant becomes two. Two becomes four. Enough. The Alpha King raised his hand for silence. We'll handle this quietly. Seal off the Eastern Garden. Post guards around the palace perimeter. And find me someone who knows how to kill a revenant. I do, Christina said quietly. Everyone looked at her. When I was learning about healing magic, I studied its opposite. Death magic. Life force manipulation. She swallowed hard. Revenants can be destroyed, but it requires overwhelming life force. They're creatures of death and hunger. They can't survive contact with pure, concentrated life energy. You want to fight it, Charles said flatly. Absolutely not. I'm the only one who can kill it. I'm a true healer. My power is literally the opposite of what that thing is. Christina turned to face him, her expression determined. This is my fault, Charles. I broke the vial. I released whatever darkness was inside it. I have to fix this. You can't fight a revenant. You're 13 years old, and I'm the only person in this palace who can generate enough life force to destroy it. She looked at the Alpha King. Your Majesty, you know I'm right. We need to lure it out and destroy it before more people die. Sergio studied her for a long moment. What would you need? Charles, you can't be considering this. The protest came from Jessie Fuentes, who'd been silent until now. If something happens to her, if the revenant kills her, it won't, Christina said firmly, because I'll have all of you protecting me while I channel enough life force to burn that thing out of existence. It's too dangerous, Charles said, his voice tight with barely controlled fear. I won't let you. You don't get to let me do anything. Christina's voice sharpened. We talked about this, remember? About me making my own choices? This is my choice, Charles. I'm the one who created this problem, and I'm going to be the one who solves it. By using yourself as bait? By using myself as a weapon. She softened slightly. I know you're scared. I'm scared too. But people are dying, and I can stop it. Isn't that what being a true healer means? Using my power to protect people. Even when it's dangerous? Charles looked like he wanted to argue, wanted to forbid it, wanted to lock her in a tower where nothing could ever hurt her. But instead, he just closed his eyes and took a deep breath. When he opened them again, his expression was resigned. Fine, but I'm not leaving your side. Not for a second. I wouldn't expect anything less. They set the trap 2 nights later. The plan was simple. Christina would return to the Eastern Garden, the place where the corruption had been released, and use herself as bait to draw out the revenant. Once it appeared, she'd channel as much life force as possible while Charles and a dozen elite guards kept it from actually draining her dry. Simple, suicidal, but it was the only plan they had. Christina stood in the center of the garden at midnight, the full moon casting silver light across the twisted hedges. Around her, hidden in the shadows, Charles and the guards waited. She could feel Charles's presence like a physical weight, protective, terrified, absolutely refusing to let her do this alone. "Ready?" Jesse called softly from his hiding spot. "Ready," Christina replied, though her heart hammered against her ribs. She closed her eyes and reached for her power, that well of golden light that lived inside her chest. Normally she used it to heal, to soothe, to mend broken things. But tonight, she needed it to burn. She pushed the light outward, letting it radiate from her body in waves. Life force, pure and concentrated, spilling into the garden like a beacon. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the temperature dropped 20 degrees in an instant. Christina's eyes snapped open. The plants around her were withering, dying, their life force being sucked away by something invisible. The moonlight seemed dimmer, the air tasted of rot and hunger. "It's here," she whispered. The revenant materialized from the shadows like a nightmare taking shape. It had been a woman once, young, beautiful, probably one of the servants who'd vanished in this garden years ago. But death and dark magic had transformed her into something else entirely. Her skin was corpse gray, her eyes completely black, and when she opened her mouth it stretched impossibly wide, revealing rows of needle-sharp teeth designed for one purpose, draining life force from the living. "So much light," the revenant hissed, her voice like grinding stone. "So much beautiful, delicious light. Give it to me, give me all of it." She lunged. Charles exploded from hiding, his sword flashing in the moonlight. The blade passed through the revenant's neck, would have decapitated any living thing, but the creature just laughed and kept coming. "Can't kill what's already dead, alpha pup," she crooned. The other guards attacked, surrounding the revenant with blessed silver weapons, and holy water, and everything the old text said, worked against undead creatures. None of it mattered. The revenant moved like smoke, dodging blows, her attention fixed solely on Christina, on the life force radiating from the true healer like a feast. "Christina, now!" Charles roared. Christina didn't hesitate. She reached deep inside herself, deeper than she'd ever gone before, and pulled. The golden light exploded from her hands in a concentrated beam, striking the revenant square in the chest. The creature screamed a sound of pure agony that shattered windows and made everyone clutch their ears. Where the light touched, the gray flesh burned, smoking and bubbling like acid. But the revenant didn't dissolve, didn't die. Instead, it adapted. Before Christina's horrified eyes, the creature's body began absorbing the golden light, drinking it in the same way it drank life force. Its black eyes flickered with gold. Its gray skin took on a healthier hue. "More," it whispered, stumbling toward Christina with reaching hands. "Give me more. I'm so hungry, so empty. I need." It grabbed Christina's wrist. The drain was instantaneous and overwhelming. Christina felt her life force being sucked out through the point of contact, pulled into the bottomless void that was the revenant's hunger. Her vision grayed, her legs buckled. The golden light inside her flickered like a candle in a hurricane. She was dying. And the worst part? She could feel the revenant's anguish underneath the hunger. This creature didn't want to kill, didn't want to drain and destroy. It was just so empty, so eternally starving, that it couldn't stop itself. The dark magic that animated it had turned a person into a weapon of pure consumption. "I'm sorry," Christina thought as darkness crept in at the edges of her vision. "I'm so sorry I created you." Then Charles was there, his hands glowing with a light that shouldn't have been possible. Alphas didn't have magic. Alphas didn't channel life force. Alphas were dominance and strength and physical power, nothing more. But Charles Hurley, the monster prince everyone had said would become a rogue, was glowing with golden light identical to Christina's. "Get away from her," he snarled, and his voice carried power that made even the revenant hesitate. He grabbed the creature's arm, the one draining Christina, and poured his own life force into the contact. But unlike Christina's gentle healing light, Charles's power was violent, aggressive. It didn't offer itself to be consumed. It burned. The revenant shrieked and released Christina, stumbling backward as Charles's power seared through it. Everywhere his light touched, the creature's flesh disintegrated, unable to absorb or adapt to the sheer violent intensity of an alpha's life force weaponized by love and desperation. "You don't touch her," Charles said, advancing on the revenant. "You don't drain her. You don't hurt her, because she's mine, and I will destroy anything living, dead, or in between that threatens her." His power intensified, becoming almost too bright to look at. The revenant tried to run, tried to dissolve back into shadows, but Charles was faster. He caught it by the throat, and his light poured into the creature like molten gold. The revenant's scream cut off abruptly. Its body began to glow from within, golden light shining through gray flesh like a lantern. Then, with a sound like breaking glass, it shattered into ash. Gone. Finally permanently gone. Charles staggered, the light around him guttering and dying. He turned to Christina, who was still on her knees where the revenant had dropped her. "Are you?" he began. Then his eyes rolled back, and he collapsed. "Charles!" Christina crawled to him, her own exhaustion forgotten. She pressed her hands to his chest, trying to channel healing energy, but her power was too depleted, too drained. "No, no, no, you can't. You used too much. You used your own life force to save me. You idiot." Jessie and Roberto were beside her instantly, checking Charles's pulse, his breathing. "He's alive," Jessie said, "but barely. His heart's barely beating. It's like he burned himself out from the inside." "Because he did," Dr. Bautista said, running up to join them. "Alphas aren't meant to channel life force. Their bodies can't handle it. He essentially used his own life as fuel to destroy that creature." She looked at Christina. "If you're going to save him, you need to do it now, before his heart stops completely." Christina stared at her hands, still faintly glowing but so weak, so depleted. She'd already poured everything she had into fighting the revenant. She had nothing left to give. "Except, I need all of you to stand back," she said quietly. "Christina, what are you?" "I said stand back." The command in her voice, backed by the last dregs of her true healer authority, made everyone instinctively retreat. Christina leaned over Charles, pressing her forehead to his, her hands flat against his chest. And she did something she'd sworn she'd never do. She began to drain life force not from Charles, but from everything around her. The plants, the earth, the very air itself. Every living thing in the garden gave up a tiny piece of its life force, flowing into Christina like a reverse of what the revenant had done. Not killing, not destroying, but borrowing, asking, taking only what was freely offered by a kingdom that loved its true healer and its future king. The stolen life force poured through Christina and into Charles, filling the void he'd created when he used himself as a weapon. His heart stuttered, caught, began beating stronger. Color returned to his face, his breathing deepened, and his eyes opened dark brown and clear, no longer glowing with impossible light. "Christina?" he whispered. She burst into tears, pressing her face against his chest. "You absolute moron. You could have died. You almost died. What were you thinking?" "I was thinking that a world without you in it isn't a world worth living in." Charles's arms came up weakly to wrap around her. "So I did what I had to do, just like you would have done for me. That's different." "No, it's not." He pulled back enough to look at her face. "We protect each other, Christina. That's what we do. That's what we've always done. And if that means burning out my own life force to save yours, then that's a price I'll pay every time." "You're ridiculous," she sobbed. "And reckless. And stupid. And She stopped, the words catching in her throat. "I love you." She didn't say it, couldn't say it. She was 13 years old, and he was 17, and nothing about this was appropriate or normal or safe. But looking at his face, at the way he smiled at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered, she knew it was true. She loved him, desperately, completely, in a way that transcended age and hierarchy and every rule the kingdom had about who could love whom. And someday, when she was old enough to say those words without everyone around them losing their minds, she would. But for now, she just held him, and he held her. And around them, the guards pretended not to see the way the future Alpha King and his true healer clung to each other like drowning people finally finding shore. The revenant was dead. The palace was safe. And Charles and Christina had proven something the kingdom would spend years trying to understand. That love, real, honest, protective love, was its own kind of power. The strongest kind there was. Chapter 10. The night he pretended to sleep. 4 years later, Christina Norton was 17 years old when she finally understood what it meant to be loved without condition. 4 years had passed since the night of the Revenant. 4 years of growing up under the watchful eyes of a kingdom that couldn't decide if she was their greatest treasure or their biggest threat. 4 years of Charles becoming the king everyone had feared he'd never be strong, just controlled. 4 years of pretending that what existed between them was merely protection and gratitude. It was the biggest lie Christina had ever told. She stood in her chambers now, no longer the small room adjacent to the servants' quarters, but a proper suite in the royal wing befitting the king's most valued. What? Ward? Companion? The kingdom still didn't have a word for what she was to him, but Christina knew. She'd known for years. She was his everything. And he was hers. The only problem? Charles still treated her like she was too young to make her own choices about them. Even at 17, even after she'd fought revenants, and survived assassination attempts, and proven herself capable 100 times over, he maintained that careful distance, never pushing, never demanding, just waiting. Always waiting. It was driving her slowly insane. "You're brooding again," said Jody Hurley, Christina's lady-in-waiting, and the only person in the palace who wasn't terrified of speaking honestly to the true healer. "Let me guess, thinking about the king?" "I'm always thinking about the king." Christina sighed, running a brush through her dark hair. "It's getting ridiculous, Jody. I'm 17. In 3 months I'll be 18, officially an adult by pack law. And he still looks at me like I'm that 6-year-old girl he found in the servants' quarters. That's because he's terrified of pressuring you." Jody adjusted Christina's nightgown pale silk that Christina secretly suspected Charles had commissioned for her, though he'd never admit it. "Everyone in the palace knows he's desperately in love with you. Everyone except maybe you. I know he loves me. That's not the problem." Christina set down the brush. "The problem is, he won't do anything about it. He won't court me properly, won't ask for a formal bond, won't even talk about the future because he's so convinced I need more time to figure out what I want." "And what do you want?" "Him." The answer came without hesitation. "I want him. I've wanted him since I was 13 years old, and he told me he'd wait forever if that's what I needed. I want to stop pretending that we're just king and healer. I want—" She stopped, frustrated tears pricking her eyes. "I want him to stop being so noble about this and just admit that we belong to each other." Jody was quiet for a moment. Then she smiled. "So tell him. I've tried. Every time I bring it up, he changes the subject or starts talking about me having more time to meet other people or insists that I need to be sure before making any permanent decisions." Christina flopped dramatically onto her bed. "How can I make him understand that I am sure? That I've been sure for years? Maybe you need to show him instead of telling him." Christina sat up. "What do you mean?" "I mean—" Jody's smile turned mischievous. "The king has been having nightmares again. Ever since that last attempt on his life 3 weeks ago. His wolf gets restless at night, and he can't sleep properly." "How do you know that?" "Because Jesse told me. And Jesse knows because he's stationed outside the king's chambers and can hear Charles pacing all night." Jody leaned in conspiratorially. "You used to sneak into his room when you were younger, didn't you? When his wolf was too violent to sleep? You'd use your power to soothe him." Christina flushed. "He told you about that?" "He didn't have to. Everyone in the palace knows the king sleeps better when you're nearby. We all just pretend not to notice." Jody squeezed Christina's hand. "So maybe it's time to stop pretending, go to him tonight, help him sleep, and if he wakes up, well, maybe it's time to have that conversation while his defenses are down." It was a terrible idea, completely inappropriate. "If anyone found out, I'll do it," Christina said. The king's chambers were dark and silent when Christina slipped inside at midnight. She'd taken the servants' passages, the same hidden corridors she'd used as a child. Jesse had seen her, of course, but he'd simply nodded and looked away, giving her the privacy he'd given her 100 times before when she'd done this same thing years ago. Back then, she'd been a child helping a troubled prince. Now she was a woman in love with a king who refused to claim her. Tonight, that was going to change. Christina found Charles in his massive bed, tangled in silk sheets, his face troubled even in sleep. He wore no shirt, just loose sleep pants that hung low on his hips. At 21, he'd become everything the kingdom had hoped for. Strong, powerful, devastatingly handsome in that dangerous alpha way. But right now, with his defenses down, he just looked tired and in pain. His wolf was restless again. She could see it in the way his muscles tensed, the way his hands clenched into fists, the way a low growl rumbled in his chest even while unconscious. The assassination attempt 3 weeks ago had been close, too close, a poisoned blade that would have killed him if Christina hadn't been there to heal him immediately. The incident had awakened old fears, old violence. The monster that Charles had spent his entire life learning to control was clawing at the surface again. Christina crossed the room silently and sat on the edge of his bed. She placed her hands gently over his heart, that same gesture she'd used 1,000 times before, and let her power flow. Golden light poured from her palms, warm and gentle. Life force, pure and healing, sinking into Charles's chest and wrapping around his wolf like a blanket. She felt the beast recognize her, settle, calm. Felt Charles's breathing deepen. Felt the tension drain from his body as sleep took him properly for the first time in weeks. This was what she'd always done. This was how she'd protected him when he couldn't protect himself. What Christina didn't know, what she'd never known, was that Charles hadn't been asleep for any of it. Not tonight. And not for the past 4 years. He'd pretended. Stayed perfectly still. Kept his breathing even. Let her think she was sneaking in unnoticed to heal him in secret, but he'd been awake for every single one of her midnight visits. Had felt every touch. Had memorized the way her power felt like coming home. Had fallen more desperately in love with her every time she chose to use her gift on him when she thought he wouldn't know. Tonight was no different. Charles lay perfectly still, feeling Christina's hands on his chest, her power sinking into his wolf, and wondered how much longer he could keep pretending, how much longer he could maintain this careful distance, when all he wanted was to pull her into his arms and never let go. She's 17, he reminded himself. She needs more time, she needs to be sure. But then Christina did something she'd never done before. She leaned down and whispered, "I know you're awake, Charles." His eyes flew open. Christina was inches away, her silver eyes knowing and sad and filled with something that made his breath catch. "How long have you been pretending?" she asked softly. "Christina." How long?" Her voice was gentle but firm. "How many times have I snuck in here thinking I was helping you without you knowing, and you've been awake the entire time?" Charles sat up slowly, very aware of how close she was, how the moonlight streaming through his windows made her look ethereal, how her nightgown was thin silk that left almost nothing to imagination. He forced his eyes back to her face. 4 years, he admitted. "Since you were 13. I figured it out the first time, and decided to let you keep thinking I didn't know because you seemed to need it. The secrecy, the feeling that you were doing something just for yourself, not because I asked. 4 years. Christina's laugh was brittle. "You've been pretending to sleep for 4 years while I poured my heart into healing you, while I touched you, and soothed you, and loved you." She stopped, but the word hung between them anyway. "Loved. You love me," Charles said. It wasn't a question. "Of course I love you, you impossible man." Tears spilled down Christina's cheeks. "I've loved you since I was 13 years old and you told me you'd wait forever. I've loved you through assassination attempts and political schemes and noble houses trying to tear us apart. I've loved you so completely that sometimes I can't breathe from it." She pressed her hands harder against his chest. "And you knew. You've known for years that I came here, that I used my power on you, that I couldn't stay away even when I was supposed to. And you said nothing, you just let me. Because I was afraid," Charles admitted, his voice rough. "Afraid that if I acknowledged it, if I told you I knew, you'd stop. And I needed it, Christina. I needed you, your touch, your power, the knowledge that even when the whole kingdom saw me as their king, you still saw me as the boy who needed saving." His hands came up to cup her face, thumbs brushing away her tears. "But more than that, I was afraid of pushing you, of making you think you had to choose me because I was your king or your protector, or because you owed me something. I wanted you to choose me because you actually wanted to, not because you felt obligated." "You idiot," Christina sobbed. "I have chosen you. I chose you 4 years ago. I chose you every single night when I snuck into your room, to make sure your wolf didn't consume you. I chose you when I destroyed Rebecca's vial instead of drinking it. I chose you when I fought the Revenant even though I was terrified. I have chosen you 1,000 times, Charles. How many more times do I have to choose you before you believe it? Charles stared at her, this woman who'd been the fragile girl he'd sworn to protect, who'd become the strongest person he knew, who'd loved him when he was nothing but rage and violence. And something inside him finally broke. Say it again, he whispered. What? Say you love me. Say it when I'm not pretending to sleep, when there's no distance between us, when it's just you and me, and the truth. Christina's breath caught. Then she leaned forward until their foreheads touched, until there was nothing between them but air and honesty. I love you, Charles Hurley. I love you so much it terrifies me. I love you enough that I'd drain life force from the entire kingdom, if it meant keeping you alive. I love you. He kissed her. Not gently. Not carefully. But with 4 years of restraint finally shattered. 4 years of pretending he didn't wake up every time she touched him. 4 years of loving her so completely that it physically hurt to maintain distance. Christina made a sound of surprise, then melted into him, her hand sliding from his chest to wrap around his neck. The kiss deepened, desperate and honest, and absolutely inevitable. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Charles rested his forehead against hers. I love you too, he said, his voice wrecked. I have loved you since you were 9 years old and covered in ink stains, trying to read pack law. I have loved you through every assassination attempt and political scheme. I have loved you so completely that when you were fighting that revenant, when I thought I might lose you, I burned out my own life force because a world without you in it isn't a world I want to exist in. He pulled back enough to look into her silver eyes. I'm sorry I made you wait. I'm sorry I pretended to sleep instead of just telling you I knew. I'm sorry for all the ways I've been too careful and too noble and too terrified of ruining you. You couldn't ruin me, Christina said fiercely. You're the reason I'm still alive. The reason I learned to be strong instead of scared. The reason I chose light over darkness. She kissed him again, softer this time. You're my home, Charles. You always have been. Then stay. His arms tightened around her. Not just tonight. Not just when I'm having nightmares. But permanently. Be mine. Not as my ward or my healer or my political asset, but as my equal, my partner, my mate, Christina finished. Say it, the word you've been avoiding for 4 years, say it. Charles smiled, that rare, genuine smile he only ever showed her. Be my mate, Christina Norton. Bond with me. Rule beside me. Spend the rest of your ridiculously long true healer life with me. That's not a question, because I already know your answer. He brushed a strand of hair from her face. You've been choosing me for 4 years. I'm just finally brave enough to choose you back publicly, officially, permanently. Then yes, Christina laughed through her tears. Yes, I'll be your mate. Yes, I'll bond with you. Yes to everything you're offering and everything we're going to build together. Thank the moon goddess, Charles breathed. Then he kissed her again, and this time there was no holding back. No pretending. No distance. Just two people who'd loved each other for years finally admitting it. When the palace woke the next morning, they found the king and his true healer together in the throne room holding hands, while the Alpha King, now officially the former king, after Charles's coronation 6 months ago, smiled with satisfaction. We're bonding, Charles announced to the assembled court. Christina Norton has agreed to be my mate, my queen, and my partner in ruling this kingdom. The nobles who'd spent years trying to separate them looked shocked. The guards who'd watched them dance around each other smiled. And Jesse and Roberto actually cheered, despite that being completely inappropriate in formal court. Lord Vince Ryan, never one to read a room, stood up. Your Majesty, with all due respect, the girl has no designation, no confirmed ability to produce heirs. Surely, if you finish that sentence, Charles said pleasantly, I will have you removed from this court and banned from the capital. Christina is mine. That's not up for debate or discussion. Anyone who has a problem with it can take it up with me personally. His eyes flooded gold, his alpha dominance washing over the court, in a wave that made even the strongest nobles bow their heads in submission. No one argued after that. The bonding ceremony happened 3 months later, a grand affair that drew alphas, betas, and omegas from across the kingdom. When Charles and Christina stood before the moon goddess's altar and spoke their vows, when they completed the bond that tied their souls together permanently, the entire kingdom felt it. A surge of power, of rightness, of two people who'd always belonged together finally becoming one. And that night, when Charles lay beside his new queen, watching her sleep with moonlight painting her skin silver, he thought about all the nights he'd pretended to be asleep while she healed him. All the times he'd felt her love through her touch and said nothing. All the years he'd waited for her to be ready. And he knew with absolute certainty that he'd wait 1,000 more lifetimes if it meant ending up here, with her. Forever. Epilogue. 10 years later, when their first child was born, a daughter with silver eyes and her mother's gift for healing the palace staff found the king weeping in the birthing room. Not from sadness, not from fear, but from the overwhelming knowledge that he'd been blessed beyond measure, that the 6-year-old girl who'd healed his father, who'd seen a monster and decided he was worth saving, who'd chosen him over and over again even when it would have been easier to choose power or safety or anything else. She'd given him everything. A kingdom at peace. A wolf finally, permanently tamed. A love that had survived assassination attempts, and dark magic and noble scheming. And now a daughter who would grow up knowing that family wasn't about bloodlines or designations or hierarchy. It was about choosing each other, every day, forever. "Why are you crying?" Christina asked from the bed, exhausted but radiant, cradling their daughter. "Because I'm happy," Charles said simply. "Because I love you. Because I spent 4 years pretending to sleep, just to feel you choose me. And now I get to spend the rest of my life choosing you back." Christina smiled, that knowing, loving smile that still made his heart race after all these years. "Come here, you ridiculous man. Come meet your daughter." And as Charles crossed the room to his family, as he took his daughter in his arms and felt her tiny hand wrap around his finger, he understood something profound. True strength wasn't in dominance or power or the ability to destroy your enemies. It was in this. In love. In choosing softness when the world demanded hardness. In being vulnerable with the one person who'd earned the right to see you at your weakest. In pretending to sleep for 4 years just so the girl you loved could feel like she was saving you, when the truth was she'd saved you the moment she decided you were worth the effort. That was the story of Charles and Christina. The monster prince and the true healer. The king and queen who'd proven that sometimes the greatest magic wasn't in healing or destroying, it was in choosing love. Over and over and over again, until death and beyond. Dear viewers, as we reach the end of Christina and Charles's story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever loved someone so much that you pretended not to notice their love for you just to give them the freedom to choose? Or have you been the one secretly choosing someone every single day, waiting for them to finally see it? Their story reminds us that the bravest thing we can do is choose love, even when it's terrifying, even when it's complicated, even when the world tells us we're not ready. If this story moved you, please hit the like button. It helps us share more stories like this with people who need them. Now tell me, what moment in this story hit you the hardest? Was it when Christina destroyed the vial? When Charles pretended to sleep for 4 years? Or when they finally chose each other out loud? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and your reflections make these stories come alive. Until the next story, remember, love isn't about being strong enough to never need anyone. It's about being brave enough to let someone see you when you're weak. Thank you for being here. Thank you for choosing this story.